Okay, ready to trade those sunny Napa Valley vineyards for something a little bit darker?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
We're diving into a double murder mystery that just gripped the community and left everybody searching for answers.
And you've given us quite the reading list on this one.
Yeah.
News reports, interviews, even snippets from other
Yeah.
podcasts. Clearly, you're looking for more than just the surface level story.
Exactly. We're going beyond the headlines, piecing together all those crucial details and hopefully uncovering some insights into what really happened.
Because this case is anything but straightforward.
Right.
It's a real life puzzle with twists and turns that could rival any fictional thriller.
So let's set the scene. Picture Napa Valley in 2004.
Okay.
We've got three young women, Adrienne and Sonia, Leslie Mazzara, and Lauren Mienza,
Right.
sharing a house on Dorset Street, living what seemed like a pretty carefree life.
You're right. From the outside looking in, they had it all. Youth, friendship, and promising futures.
Yeah.
Adrian was a successful engineer with a close circle of friends. Leslie, a former beauty queen, had just moved to town and landed a job at the prestigious Napa Coppola winery,
Wow.
owned by Francis Ford Coppola himself.
And we can't forget Lauren, the surviving roommate. It's her chilling account of that Halloween night that really sets the stage for this whole mystery.
It does. It makes you wonder, what was going through their minds back then?
Yeah.
What dreams they had for the future just before everything changed so drastically.
Right.
Yeah.
So Halloween night starts out pretty normal, right? The roommates are handing out candy, enjoying the festivities. But just after 1:00 a.m., things take a terrifying turn. Lauren wakes up to strange noises and screams coming from somewhere in the house.
It's almost impossible to imagine the fear she must have felt waking up in the dead of night with no idea what's going on.
Right. And according to her account, she hears someone running down the stairs and instinctively makes a run for it, escaping through the back door.
Talk about a split-second decision.
Yeah.
It's chilling to think that might have been the difference between life and death for her.
Absolutely. She waits outside, terrified, until she thinks the coast is clear, then ventures back inside.
Oh, gosh.
And that's when she stumbles upon a scene that no one should ever have to witness.
Adrienne and Leslie were both found in Adrienne's bedroom, victims of a brutal attack.
Yeah.
Multiple stab wounds.
Yeah.
The details are pretty graphic.
Yeah.
It's no wonder this case sent shockwaves through the typically peaceful Napa community.
And immediately the police launched a full-scale investigation, but it seems like they hit a lot of dead ends early on. They focused heavily on Leslie's social life, questioning a staggering number of men she had dated or even just interacted with.
That's right. You sent us an article mentioning the police interviewed over 1,000 men connected to Leslie.
Wow.
While it speaks to her outgoing personality, it makes you wonder if they were spreading their resources too thin. Maybe overlooking other possibilities. Did you get that sense at all from your research?
Yeah, definitely. It seems like the sheer volume of potential leads might have slowed them down, especially considering Leslie's murder ended up being the one with the least clear motive.
And let's not forget the added pressure of the families desperate for answers.
Right.
The mothers, Kathy and Arlene, were thrown into a nightmare. Trying to grieve while simultaneously pushing for justice, it must have been unbearable.
There was even this website tribute created by one of Leslie's ex-boyfriends, Brian West. Did any of the materials you sent us delve deeper into that? It feels like a detail that could be significant or just a red herring.
Unfortunately, most sources just mention it in passing. However, it does raise some questions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Was it a genuine expression of grief or a way to insert himself into the narrative?
Right.
Perhaps something worth exploring further.
Definitely. And then there was William Lee Youngblood Sr., the father of another one of Leslie's exes. He was on the radar early on because of those phone calls he made to the house.
Right. Those calls, coupled with the fact that Leslie had apparently expressed some discomfort with Youngblood Sr., definitely painted him as a person of interest.
Oh, wow.
The investigators even traveled to South Carolina to interview him. But both he and his son provided DNA samples, and they came back negative, leading to another dead end.
So with those initial leads turning up nothing, the investigation shifted focus to Adrienne's boyfriend, Christian Lee. Their relationship had been strained, with arguments and tension building up.
It almost felt like the investigators were grasping at straws at this point. They showed up at Christian's place in the middle of the night,
Oh, wow.
questioning him, collecting his DNA, even taking his bedsheets as evidence.
A dramatic scene for sure, but just like all the other leads, his DNA didn't match.
It really highlights the sense of frustration the investigators must have been feeling.
Yeah.
Months were passing, they had mountains of evidence,
Right.
but no clear path forward. Did any of your sources speculate on whether this pressure led to missteps in the investigation?
There are a few theories out there, but nothing concrete. Some experts suggest that the initial focus on Leslie's connections might have delayed the exploration of other angles. It's a point worth considering as we continue to piece together this puzzle.
As the investigation dragged on with no arrests and no solid leads, it must have felt like time was slipping away. Imagine the weight of that on the victims' families.
It's heartbreaking to even think about. Arlene, Adrian's mom, even started driving Adrian's car and listening to her preset radio stations, clinging to any little connection she could.
It's a poignant detail that speaks volumes about the depth of her grief and the yearning for anything familiar.
Absolutely. And in a strange twist of fate, amidst all this heartache, Adrian's best friend, Lily Prudhomme, and her boyfriend, Eric Koppel, decided to get married.
Yeah, that in itself isn't unusual, but what's truly striking is that their original wedding date was supposed to be November 1st, the day after the murders.
Oh, wow.
They even planned a trip to Hawaii, and Adrian and Lauren would have been there with them.
Wow, it makes you think, doesn't it? What if Adrian and Lauren had been on that trip? Could things have turned out differently? Or would it have just brought the tragedy closer to Lily and Eric? It's a chilling thought.
Definitely. And to add another layer to this already complex situation, Arlene was asked to participate in the wedding ceremony reading scriptures.
Oh, wow.
She even looked Eric in the eye, saw sadness, shared grief.
It's almost too surreal to comprehend. This entire time, the person responsible for shattering their lives was right there in their midst, and the police were still scrambling for answers.
You're absolutely right. Over 1,000 interviews, 200 DNA samples, and yet the case remained unsolved. It makes you wonder if there were any critical missteps in the investigation, something those sources you sent might shed light on.
Some experts have suggested that the intense focus on Leslie's social life might have created a sort of tunnel vision, leading investigators to overlook crucial clues related to Adrian.
It's a valid point.
Yeah.
Sometimes the most obvious answer isn't always the right one.
Exactly. But amidst the uncertainty and frustration, there was finally a glimmer of hope, almost a year after the murders. The results from the cigarette butts found at the crime scene finally came back.
Ah, yes, those Camel Turkish Gold cigarettes. The DNA on those butts matched the blood found at the scene, providing the first concrete lead in the case.
What's interesting is that some of your sources actually question why it took so long to process those cigarette butts. Did you find anything in your research that addresses those concerns?
There was some speculation that the sheer volume of evidence might have overwhelmed the crime lab. Back then, DNA analysis wasn't as advanced or as readily available as it is today.
That makes sense. It's a reminder of how much forensic science has evolved over the years.
For sure. So armed with this new DNA evidence, the police decided to go public, hoping to stir something up, maybe jog someone's memory.
And it worked, didn't it? Just 5 days later, they got their break. A confession. But here's where things take the most unexpected turn. The person who confessed wasn't some shadowy figure who'd managed to stay under the radar. It was Eric Koppel, Lily's husband.
The husband of Adrian's best friend. The man who stood with Lily at their wedding, who listened to Arlene read those scriptures.
It's crazy.
Can you imagine the shock that rippled through the community? It was a revelation that completely upended everything they thought they knew about the case.
Arlene even mentioned in one of the interviews you sent that when she asked who had been arrested, she was expecting a name she wouldn't recognize. But when she heard it was Eric, it was like a punch to the gut.
The sense of betrayal must have been devastating.
Yeah.
It's hard to fathom what Arlene must have gone through.
Absolutely. But how did this seemingly normal guy, a quiet land surveyor with no prior criminal record, end up confessing to such brutal crimes? It turns out Eric had sent suicide notes to his parents, admitting to the murders and expressing a desire to take his own life rather than face the consequences.
Those notes are chilling. He talks about denying the government the satisfaction of watching him die, about seeking his own form of justice. It's a disturbing glimpse into his mindset at the time.
And thankfully, his parents intervened. Upon receiving those notes, they confronted Eric and managed to convince him to turn himself in.
It's a small glimmer of hope in this otherwise incredibly dark story, but it also raises a mountain of questions. Why would Eric do this? How could Lily not have known? And most importantly, why were Adrienne and Leslie targeted?
Right, those are the million-dollar questions. And the answers, or lack thereof, are what make this case so haunting. The why remains elusive, especially when it comes to Leslie's murder.
And that brings us to the complexities of the motive. The district attorney argued it all stemmed from Eric's deep insecurities and possessive nature. particularly surrounding his relationship with Lily. He allegedly resented any time she spent with others, especially Adrian.
So, in Eric's mind, Adrian posed a threat to his relationship. Is that what you're saying?
That seems to be the prevailing theory. It's a classic tale of jealousy and perceived betrayal. But what makes it so perplexing is that Eric's accounts of that Halloween night are fragmented at best. He remembers taking a knife, smoking a cigarette outside the house on Dorset Street, but his memory of the actual killings is hazy.
He claims he had his eyes closed during the attacks, but admitted to knowing what he had done. It's hard to reconcile that with the brutality described in the reports he sent.
Right, it's a chilling detail that raises more questions than answers. And then there's the question of Leslie. Eric offered no real explanation for her murder, no clear reason why she was targeted.
Some of the sources I read suggested that she was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, a victim of circumstance. But it's hard to accept that, knowing how much effort was initially put into investigating Leslie's connections.
Exactly. It makes you wonder if there's something more we're missing, some piece of the puzzle that hasn't been revealed. Do any of your sources offer alternative theories about Leslie's murder?
There's a lot of speculation, of course. Some suggest that perhaps Eric saw Leslie as a threat to his alibi, someone who could place him at the scene. Others believe his motive might have been darker, more sinister than he's let on.
It's certainly a case that leaves you with more questions than answers. And it's made even more complicated by the actions of those closest to the victims. Remember, Eric ultimately agreed to plead guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder, avoiding a trial.
It was a decision that spared the families the ordeal of a lengthy trial, but it also meant that some of the finer details, the nuances of the case, were never fully explored in a courtroom setting.
And then we come to the sentencing. A moment filled with raw emotion and conflicting perspectives. Arlene, Adrian's mother, delivered a powerful statement, addressing Eric directly, calling him out for the brutality of his actions and declaring that she would think of him no more.
A truly powerful moment of strength and resilience in the face of unimaginable loss. But then Lily, Eric's wife, stepped up to speak, and instead of condemning her husband, she expressed unwavering love and pleaded for understanding.
It was a turn of events that no one expected, least of all Arlene, who had formed a bond with Lily in the aftermath of the murders, believing they were united in their search for justice.
You can only imagine the sense of betrayal Arlene must have felt. Lily's defense of Eric, even after his confessed crimes, caused a deep rift between them, a rift that some say never truly healed.
It's a testament to the complexities of grief, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love, even in the face of horrific acts.
Then we have Eric's own statement, of which only the first minute was recorded. He claimed to be a broken man, consumed by guilt and remorse. He spoke of his fear of losing Lily, his belief that Adrian was driving a wedge between them.
Essentially, he painted himself as a man driven to desperation, a man who believed he was acting to save his relationship, even if it meant taking innocent lives. But many found his explanation hard to accept. Was it truly a crime of passion fueled by fear and insecurity? Or was there something more calculated, more sinister at play?
We're left to grapple with those questions, aren't we? We have a confession, a conviction, yet the why, the true motive behind Leslie's murder, remains a mystery.
And that's what makes this case so compelling, so unsettling. Even with all the pieces seemingly laid out before us, the complete picture remains elusive.
Eric Koppel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice, in a legal sense, was served. But the scars of that Halloween night, the unanswered questions, the enduring mystery of Leslie's murder, continue to haunt those touched by this tragedy.
So as you revisit the materials you've collected, consider those unanswered questions. What resonates most with you? Do you believe Eric's claims of a desperate attempt to save his relationship? Or do you sense a darker truth hidden beneath the surface? This deep dive into the nightmare Napa is a stark reminder that even in the most idyllic settings, darkness can lurk, and sometimes even with a confession, the complete truth remains shrouded in shadow.